So very quickly, the shepherds. The shepherds were shepherds who looked after the flocks for temple sacrifice. There's historical data, there's data by writers, there's research that has been done that proves this. They were the actual shepherds that looked after the flocks. Secondly, they were shepherds who looked after those lambs for sacrifice in the temple in Jerusalem, and they knew about it. Now, whether they were high priests, or some of them were high priests, or some of them were, one of them was a high priest, and the rest were just ordinary shepherds, or whether they were all ordinary shepherds who had been trained by the high priest, we're not quite sure, but they knew the law and they knew how to look for an unblemished lamb. Jesus was born in a place called Migdal. Now, there's a whole leading up to this. You've got the story of Rachel in Genesis 35, which talks about her death after she gave birth to Benjamin and where she was buried. That was in Bethlehem, which was some 5 miles away from Jerusalem. And then you have these shepherds being bestowed this work. Now, David himself was a shepherd, and maybe when he put the temple into place, he also put how the shepherd should be put into place. That's just an assumption, I don't know, but he was a shepherd. Later, he was king, and so the plans may have been there for this. But these shepherds looked after sheep that the Mishnah itself said could only be kept in Bethlehem. The rest of the sheep were in the wilderness. They weren't allowed into populated areas, but the sheep for the sacrifice of the temple were, and it's in the Mishnah. So, shepherds, where was Jesus born? In the Tower of the Flock, Migdal. Micah 4 and 5, read it. Again, going back to Rachel, this is where she was born, and that's the shepherds out the way for now until I do something deeper next year. Now for the Magi. The Magi were warrior priests and kingmakers. They had gained a reputation. They took on Alexander the Great in the 300s, and he bet them. After their armies were decimated, they built themselves up again, created a new army and came forward, and that was that. So what we had were those shepherds, those Magi who were now leaders and were able to come and visit Jesus because they recognized the king when they saw one. They were kingmakers. Now, these Magi were great warriors. They were fighters, and they traveled in troops. One Magi could have a troop, a bodyguard, a whole entourage of about 1,000 people. Now, it's more than likely there were more than 3. We hear of 3 gifts, and if we go to Isaiah 60, we actually hear of a 4th gift. And Isaiah 60, the beginning of it is a prophecy regarding the Magi, where they came from and what they were about. They rode horses. Their camels were load carriers. Isaiah 60 says the load carriers were overwhelmed with treasure when they came to see Jesus. So these weren't just small boxes that they had. So we got the Magi, who were warrior kings, who knew a king when they saw it. Read Luke 2, read Matthew 2, shepherds and kings. Jesus was born in a stable, in a tower of the flock, Migdal. 2 years later, when the Magi arrived, and we know this if we read the text, because if we read Luke, the end of Luke 2, the end of Luke 2, and then the beginning of Matthew 2, we see that Jesus was in a house. That house was in Nazareth. We see that. He went back there. So that's where Jesus was when the wise men visited him. The word for baby is used in the story of the shepherds. The word for child, a toddler, is used in the story of the wise men, the Magi. So there you have it in a nutshell very quickly. The child in the tower, part 2. Visited by shepherds who represented the Jews and the law and sacrifice, visited by kings who represented the future of the church and who we were as Gentiles. And that's it. That's it. So there we have it. The shepherds and kings, the child in the tower, part 2. That was a very quick run through, but I hope that summed up everything and gave you some more snippets. Scriptures to read: Genesis 35, Luke 2, Matthew 2, Micah 4 and 5. That'll keep you going. And also read about Daniel, because Daniel was the one that came to the Magi as a Jew and was able to transform them into these people that came and knew who Jesus was, and the scriptures that referred to him. Also Isaiah 60. So there's a lot of scriptures there for you to read. You've got a whole year to do it. And Happy New Year. I know we're 7 days in, but what the heck. And the King of Kings is still Lord, and we've got a fight on our hands to keep the faith alive. So let's do that. Amen.